right, thank you, Amy. Good morning. So definitely, Amy talked about brain power in the room. Certainly a lot of that. And the most conversations I've had so far this morning is about our socks, of all things. Right? So everybody knows that cool companies offer socks as giveaways, and CENGN is certainly a cool company. So we're going to talk about prosperity through connectivity today. And we want to unpack that a little bit. So what does prosperity mean? What does connectivity mean, actually, in this new tech world? And we have a great lineup of keynote speakers and panels to talk about that. And I want to start with what is the definition of prosperity? So I looked it up in Webster's, and it says economic well-being. So we want to be rich, right? But is that really all there is to it? I think not, right? So I think there's an opportunity to build on our global competitiveness, our standard of living, our social infrastructure. So I think of prosperity through a little bit of a different lens, or maybe expanded lens. So economic prosperity is certainly our wealth, our personal wealth, our corporate wealth, the wealth in the country. But I like to talk about innovation prosperity. So innovation prosperity is our capacity for creativity through R&D and commercialization of new ideas. And those two things, to me, are reinforcing each other. Right? Through economic prosperity, we can invest in innovation, and innovation drives economic prosperity. And the two together actually enable our social prosperity. So I love history. I've read a couple really fascinating books recently. One of them by a guy named Yuval Harari. Some of you might have read some of his books. They're on the front table of your favorite bookstore. And he divides humanity in kind of three ages, right? So it starts with the age of religion. So for centuries or millennia, humans take their authority from gods. But about 300 years ago, humanists started developing what we called the age of humanism, whereby we take our authority from our own beliefs and drive our individuality. And he postulates that we're now at the beginning of something called the age of data, whereas through accumulation of data, analyzing that data, through algorithms, we will gain actually authority from those algorithms in that data. That's pretty controversial, I think, and has some fairly significant implications from a regulatory, ethical, even existential perspective in terms of what it means to be humans. So I'm not going to talk about that today because I don't have enough time, but maybe at the reception later. But certainly it has tremendous opportunity, it represents tremendous opportunity for all of us in terms of the transformational capability of our economy, our innovation, and what we can do with this new technology. So for me, the pillars of this data age are four key pillars, four key things. So it starts with connectivity, and we want to be connected everywhere all the time, and now we're going to connect everything. People have started coining now the term IoE, Internet of Everything. So maybe the only thing that moves faster than pace of innovation is the new acronyms that our industry likes to create. But certainly I think connectivity is the first and kind of foundational pillar. The second one is data, big data, cloud computing, analytics. One staggering statistic is 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. That's pretty staggering when you think about it. But only 0.5% of that data has been analyzed. So I think that highlights an opportunity with big data and computing and analytics to do something with that. The third pillar would be security. And so, you know, security is foremost in the minds of all of us these days in terms of securing data, securing our communications. And, you know, if without securing the data, if the data is not trusted, the whole infrastructure falls apart, right? So we have to be able to trust the data, and it's not just for privacy, but it's be able to actually trust into everything that we transact and who we are ultimately. And finally, AI and automation. So these new networks are going to be built in very different ways, and automation is going to be the only way that we're actually going to be able to scale them. And I think we're only scratching the surface in terms of what we can do with AI. So what does that mean for the networks of the future? Right? So everybody knows about Moore's law, right? Computing power doubles every 18 months. But who has heard about Nielsen's law? Anybody? Right. I don't see a single hand, right? So Nielsen's law says that users' internet bandwidth will double every year. So that represents there's a gap in the growth rate of internet bandwidth and computing bandwidth. You know, so the obvious conclusion from that is you have a bottleneck in the network. The network is the bottleneck. And you've seen that over the last many years in terms of all of us in the telecom industry trying to stay ahead of the requirements in the network. And there's been a tremendous investment in the last several years in 100 gig networks, and we're already moving on to 200, 400 gig, and we'll go to terabit networks. So now we're seeing the slowdown of Moore's law. So Moore's law is expected to maybe die within the next decade. So Moore's law is dead. You can stop investing in networks, right? No, obviously not. So because we're now cloudifying computing, we're virtualizing computing, we're decentralizing computing. And so through these trends, you have really an infinite amount of computing power to drive new applications and new requirements. And so the network itself is going to continue to be the fundamental enabler of these applications. And so from a mobile connectivity perspective, what are we seeing? So this slide, I attended an event put on by Martello last week. It was a great event, and there was a presentation by a gentleman named Mike Galvin from BT who graciously allowed me to use his slide. It's really impactful in its simplicity, right? So you look at the generations of wireless networking that we've seen over the last decades. And so we're moving now from a few devices per person to thousands of devices per person. That's really kind of fundamental change in how we have to build networks. And ultimately, automation is going to be fundamental to our ability to do that. It also presents tremendous opportunity in terms of what we do with that connectivity. Okay, so I've said the word opportunity a few times now. So here's another definition. So what's the definition of opportunity? So I looked it up now in Oxford because I want to make sure I try different dictionaries. And opportunity is a set of circumstances that allow you to do something, which is kind of not what I expected, actually, the definition to be, right? So it doesn't mean everything is easy or that it'll be obvious or that it'll be given to you. It's just a set of circumstances that allow you to do something. So I think we have an opportunity in Canada, and all of us here in this room, to do something. And I think there's a bit of a sense of urgency around that. First question is, well, is there a market? Well, yeah, obviously I think there's a market, but that market is changing quite radically now with this connectivity capabilities that we're enabling. And it's transforming, or it has the opportunity to transform fundamentally non-traditional kind of industries, or sorry, traditional industries, non-traditional from a technology perspective. And so another interesting stat. In Canada, 60% of ICT workers work outside the ICT industry, which is pretty interesting stat in and of itself. And that reflects the opportunity that exists to all of these industries to transform themselves, to change the way they interact with their customers, to change the way they interact with their supply chain, to change everything about their operations and bringing efficiency, and ultimately they'll bringing better outcomes for their business. So when you think about things like healthcare and agriculture, better outcomes have direct impact to our day-to-day life and our prosperity as a country. So I'm not going to read all these numbers, but you can trust me, they're big, right? The opportunity in terms of what it means for a technology supplier of products or services is tremendous to take advantage of these new trends. So how are we doing? Right? So there's a lot of different reports and surveys that talk about Canada's performance, and they all kind of have the same kind of conclusion, which is we're kind of middle of the pack, which is really not where we want to be. But I want to look at that from an opportunity perspective. So this was an interesting one because it unpacks some of the contributing factors in a, to me, was interesting way, right? So this is a Bloomberg innovation survey. And you can see that we're doing really well in terms of high-tech companies. We're kind of in global leaders in terms of high-tech companies. And that's just a pure number. It's not per capita or anything like that. So for a country of 35 million people to be leading in terms of the number of high-tech companies says something already. It's like it's already a good indication. And back to my definition of opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to do something. So where it starts to fall back a little bit is the contributing factors to scaling those companies, right? So you look at our R&D performance in terms of just raw dollars spent in R&D, raw R&D personnel, like people headcount working in R&D, we're middle of the pack. In terms of education, which is measured in different ways in terms of postgraduates or graduates and postgraduates in STEM fields, we're kind of middle of the pack as well. Patents, middle of the pack. So we have a really fountain of creativity in the country. So that's never, I don't think, ever been a problem. We have a lot of creativity, we have a lot of good ideas, we have a lot of companies, but we don't scale them. So we gotta find a way to focus our energies in a way that allows us to scale those companies. So this is the money slide. So this is a report from the OECD, and it talks about job performance, ICT job performance, which is a percentage of jobs in a particular country, ICT percentage of jobs over all the jobs in that country, right? So the OECD average is 3.7% of jobs are ICT jobs. In Canada, that's 2.6%. So that doesn't sound like a huge difference, right? But that's 250,000 jobs. That's a pretty big number. And you start comparing that to leaders like Finland, and it's approaching 1 million jobs. So I think this focuses the mind in terms of what the opportunity is, right? And there's a lot of different things that have to come together for us to start to climb that mountain. And we'll talk about a few of those things now, but this is an opportunity for us. And it will require us to work on talent. It will require us to work on scaling. It will require us to maybe attract some of the best and brightest from outside the country as well to be able to really build on that number. So there's, like we said now a couple times, a lot of brains in this room. So there's a lot of discussion about what we need to do as a country to to start to address this issue, this opportunity. And so there's not, I don't think, a single list or a single black and white answer. I don't pretend to have the single list. This is my list. It's a list, okay? And it's a beginning of a conversation. So from my perspective, there's like 4 different things that need to happen for us to improve in this space. And so 1, we have to have an innovation engine. We have to build our human capital. We have to have our enabling environment, and I think we need a national platform. So if I unpack that a little bit, and I'm going to highlight just a couple things. There's a lot more to talk about within each of these things, but I want to highlight just a couple of things within each of them. So from an innovation engine perspective, I think we need to increase our R&D investment in the country. So GERD is essentially R&D investment as a percentage of GDP. So we are kind of lagging in this area. It's just another metric to show what I was talking about earlier. The other thing is I think we need to really look at Canadian procurement of Canadian innovation, right? So we're kind of sometimes our own worst enemies. And we talk about government procurement. Certainly government has a huge role to play here, but all of us, are procuring technology all the time. So we should be looking at procurement of Canadian innovation inside the country. To use it as a foundational, for the businesses or people who are building businesses in the country. From a human capital perspective, I think this is already happening. I think we can deepen this academia industry partnerships in terms of making sure that students in universities and colleges come out with the skills that are directly relevant to what industry needs. And it's a fast-moving environment, right? So technology is changing fast. It's a big challenge for universities to stay on top of that. So having partnerships with industry on that is one way to do that. We also should be focusing on providing practical experience to students and graduates. It's one way to allow them to stay ahead of that curve. And we talk a lot about STEM, which is obviously fundamental. I think we need to talk also a lot more about sales and marketing, right? So we don't do enough to train the next generation of sales and marketing leaders in the country. Somebody, I can't remember, recently said that they had looked it up and there was, in Canada, a single university program that actually taught sales. Whereas in the US, I can't remember what the number was. It was a big number. So I think we need to think about that as well as the STEM jobs, STEM education. And then, like I said earlier, I think we have to think about how do we attract international talent, because to really bridge a 250,000 job gap, we have to be a place where the best and brightest from around the world want to come and live and work and contribute. So the enabling environment is the regulatory, the capital, the fiscal environment. We have a lot of strengths in the country. We have a lot of programs to help technology companies scale and improve in different ways. CENGN is one of those. I think one of the things we have to think about as a community is how do we make that easily accessible, right? I've been on the startup side of things trying to access these programs. It's not always very easy. It's not always very obvious how to do that. So we have to think about how do we make that easily accessible for the people that need it. And then from an incentive perspective, we have a lot of great strength already in Canada. I think our tax policy is solid. I think we have things like SHRED and IRAP are tremendous assets to the country. I think we have to think a little bit about incentives that allow us to keep the benefit in the country, right? In terms of scaling in the country, keeping the IP and the benefits, ultimately the revenues and the tax dollars in the country. There are things there that we can do better. And a national platform. So I think there is a need for a cross-industry, cross-stakeholder collaboration platform, a technology collaboration, business collaboration, and allowing us to be kind of in the co-opetition environment, so that if we all want to contribute to this opportunity that Canada has, that we're contributing together inside this ecosystem. Okay, so now I want to talk about impact a little bit, and so I'm going to talk about CENGN a little bit. I think we have we can be part of the solution. We are already part of the solution, and we want to be even more going forward. Right, so I think many of you here are already part of the CENGN family, and so you know what our mandate is, what our mission is. Our goal is to help accelerate the competitiveness, global competitiveness of Canada's ICT and next generation networking sector, and we do that with 4 key pillars. And so creating a collaboration sandbox, developing talent, accelerating commercialization of innovation, and being a center of excellence for the technologies in the space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those and maybe highlight a couple of things that I see for the future for CENGN in each case. So collaboration is the foundational piece of CENGN. Right? So we wouldn't be here without the support of our members and of our funding partners first and foremost. Now, I know they're hopefully all represented here today. I want to thank you all for that, because otherwise, certainly we would not exist. And beyond that, we also have a broad ecosystem of partners who contribute to the mission in a lot of different ways. We want to really continue to expand that and broaden it. For me, the pan-Canadian mandate of CENGN is really important. It's kind of fundamental to what I think the company needs to be able to do. So we're going to deepen our ties to the innovation ecosystems regionally. We're going to get closer to what all of the different regional, provincial, and city actors need to do. We're also going to gain new members and to complement our technology scope and our ecosystem strength. So I hope to be able to talk about that some more in the days and weeks to come. From a talent perspective, we already have very strong outreach and partnership with all of the leading universities and colleges in Canada. The CENGN co-op program is one of the great success stories of the company. We're a company of 30 full-time employees, and we take a dozen co-ops every term. So that's been really successful program. We put those co-ops through training, and we put them to work on real stuff. So they come out of that with some skills that allow them to continue their careers. But we're also going to launch something called CENGN Academy. So this first kind of public discussion about that. So you heard it here first, and we'll talk more about that. But CENGN has a kind of unique position in the ecosystem through the technology leadership that we have, and our place in the ecosystem allows us to be a focal point for talent development in the country. And so we've done that already for the last several years of the existence of the company, but we're going to formalize that and scale it in ways that hopefully will become obvious to everybody. So CENGN Academy, and Peter Heath should be here somewhere, who leads our efforts back there, Peter. So if you want to talk about that with Peter, please do so. We do not do this alone. Of course, the CENGN Academy is in close partnership with all of our academia partners and our members and other stakeholders. From a network technology perspective, we have some obvious strengths already. So we've built a leading edge cloud computing, cloud networking platform. We have very obvious, strong strengths in this area, but we want to make sure that we're covering all key areas of networking technology going forward. We've done, I think, projects with SMEs in all of these areas of technology. And we also want to make sure that going forward, our infrastructure leverages or includes all of these areas of technology. So security, as I said, is fundamental to everything going forward in terms of this new data age. So we will be doing more in security with a host of stakeholders and partners. IoT is important, as I said earlier, and just a couple of weeks ago, we actually turned up our mobile IoT infrastructure in our data center. So we're now open for projects with interesting SMEs and other companies who want to do mobile IoT projects with us. And certainly, last but not least, commercialization. And ultimately, this is what we need to do. We need to scale. We need to be able to bring innovation to market in Canada, globally. This starts with the support and services that we offer our SME customers, many of which are represented here today. So our ability to do kind of technical validation, the proof of concept, scale testing, all the technology validation capabilities is the front end of those services, and then complemented with some marketing and PR capabilities. And you'll see us formalize some of these as well. Like we formalized CENGN Academy, we want to formalize some of these services. We want to expand on them and make sure that we're introducing services that support and benefit the whole ecosystem. So you'll hear more from us on this space as well. Okay, so I have to finish in terms of accomplishments, right? So the company's existed already 4 years, so there are accomplishments on the table already, and we're pretty pleased with them, right? So we've helped, or we've conducted, close to 60 projects with SMEs today, and we've trained over 1,000 people, had now close to 150 co-op students and interns at CENGN. And independent study shows the benefits and the impact, back to that word, right, impact, that we've had in terms of jobs and GDP. But that's not, this is only the beginning, right? So we want to really scale that, and what we expect, what we're planning for the next 3 years is a 4x impact on or 4x on these accomplishments and impacts. So we're gonna quadruple the number of projects that we want to do. We want to train over 2,000 people, et cetera, and ultimately our goal is to get to an impact of 6,000 jobs. So we're trying to make our contribution to the opportunity that we have. And with a 1 to 10 ROI, I think it's hopefully money well spent from our supporters. Okay, so opportunity leads to impact, leads to prosperity, and around the circle it goes, right? There is a sense of urgency around this. Like, time is of the essence. Market windows open, market windows close. But I think we're, like we said, at the beginning of a new data age, which represents tremendous opportunity for all of us. So CENGN wants to be this focal point for the ecosystem, a place where everybody can come, contribute, collaborate towards the greater mission. And so today is one opportunity for that. All the members, many SMEs are represented here. A lot of other friends of CENGN are here. So engage and join us in that journey. Thank you.